Hello, dear heroes in training. Welcome back to another episode of My Hero Therapy Podcast. I am one of your two hosts, Benjamin Tights, Registered Psychological Associate, Psychology Doctoral Candidate, but you know me as the empathic hero, Pathos, and I am, of course, joined by...
I am Dr. Nicole Hassler, but for the purposes of this podcast, you all know me as Psyche, the intuitive hero. Keep in mind, this podcast is for educational purposes only. While we are both therapists, we are not your therapists, unless we are your therapists.
Well, Psyche, we have another awesome episode. For our listeners, if you guys recall, we left off at the end of episode 3, which was called Roaring Muscles. And we were joined by Muscles, the swole hero, our dear audio editor, Kyle Rebar. Thank you, Kyle. And so now we come into the actual hero course examination. And oh boy, like this, I don't like tests. I'm not a good test taker. If I had to take this test, I would probably just be like, nope, bye, I'm not going to be a hero.
And I feel like I love this episode so much just for that purpose. Like, if anybody, going through school, whether it be high school, college, grad school, whatever you're at, like, exams suck. They just suck. Yeah,
and I mean, everyone, experiences test anxiety in some degree at some point in their life. So this episode is very relatable, especially if you consider, like, taking an exam in a subject that's always been really hard for you. Like for me in school, math and science have always been very difficult. And every time I had to take a test in those classes, like I would always think, oh no, I'm stupid. I'm not good enough. And we see that kind of here, that Izuku is worrying, oh crap, like was that training that I did, am I good enough for this? Like here, I have to face these giant freaking robots, which, seems really cool from like a visual perspective, but it really makes me wonder, because obviously I've seen the rest of the show and I know who the other like main character students are going to be. Really makes me wonder how they passed it, because not a lot of their powers like relate to combat.
Yeah, they really don't lend themselves to that.
Yeah, so it makes me wonder that maybe there's actually different physical tests that, like, just in Deku's stage is the robots. There must be some other ones, because like there are so many characters that like their quirks just aren't combative quirks, and so it really makes me wonder, how do they judge the students? And we're actually going to learn a little bit about how they go through the judgment in this episode. But to start us off, we have Izuku is frozen. He
100, yep.
Terrified, and he's
shaking.
He was shaking like a leaf, and he is really scared. Not just for his physical safety, but he realizes he's very far behind the other students.
Crap! I'm already behind.
And he's in awe of all their quirks and all their abilities. So here we get that kind of like the mix of imposter syndrome with his geeky nerdiness, where he's like, oh my god, that quirk's so cool, and I wish I could take notes on it, but I can't, because oh god, I'm not gonna live long enough. I just thought it was really interesting. He is rushing through this test. He's like, please, I have to get a single point. And I was just like, I felt for him, because like he finally has this opportunity to get to this hero school. He had the training with the one and only All Might, and now he's like, oh my god, I can't even get a single point. Like, that's heartbreaking.
And I felt this a lot too, because and I'm sure many of us can relate, when you're taking a test sometimes and you feel like you're really prepared, like you've done everything that you could do to possibly prepare for this test, and then you're watching everybody around you and they're, finishing before you, they're done with the test, and you're like, oh my god, what is going on? Like, why am I not done? Like, why am I struggling so much when everybody else doesn't seem to be struggling? And then that just adds to the anxiety of just feeling like I didn't prepare enough and I'm not ready. And so when I see Deku and hear him saying, I just need to get a single point, and feeling like he's falling behind, like I felt that.
Yeah, it really is. And I'm honestly, I felt that so many times at school, taking tests, and like I thought I studied hard, I thought I prepared, and then I look at like the first question, like, what the fuck is this? Like, and then of course, you see other people just like, they're writing away. They're like, their pencils are zooming across the paper, and you're like, what is this? Did I get a trick test or something like that? Like,
I remember sitting down for my licensing exam, which Pathos will eventually get to that point. And I studied 5 months. 5 months I studied for this exam. And I sat down in front of the computer, and the very first question, I looked at it and I was like, this is how it's going to go, huh? This is just how it's going to be. And it was something that I had not even studied. And I was like, to ease Pathos's anxiety about that, the licensing exam for psychologists has about 25 pilot questions on it, which you don't know what the pilot questions are, but they're designed to just be on this licensing exam, and they're not actually graded. And I'm fairly certain that was a pilot question, but even still, it was just one of those kind of like what the fuck moments where I'm just like, come on.
What is this? Yeah, I've started studying. I have like this big like review book with like all the like information for each section, and I have practice tests. And I'm probably gonna like sign up for like a training course or whatever, but like it's oh gosh, I'm scared for that. I've heard horror stories. This is basically, for our listeners, this is our version of the UA entrance exam. Especially because like I had said earlier, like you have people whose quirks aren't combat related, but yet this test is only testing combat abilities. And looking through the practice tests for the psychology licensure exam, there's a lot of questions that have nothing to do with like clinical work, like has nothing to do with my ability to practice and do therapy. And so I feel very similar to Deku here. I'm like, wait a minute, like what are you testing me on? So next year when I take it, we'll see. We'll have a special, UA graduation episode for me, I guess. I don't know.
Absolutely.
Yes. But one thing I really want to point out in this episode is, as we see Deku like struggling, we see in the in the shadows of the judgment room, one of the teachers is explaining that in such an exam, just like in real hero work, the things that are most needed are information gathering, the mobility to quickly deal with new threats, and the ability to remain composed, as well as pure combat ability. Which, on the surface, you don't see that with this test. Oh, just defeat the giant robot monsters. But once I heard that, I started realizing, oh, okay, so, they're tricking the students into thinking, okay, it's just pure combat. But we see, okay, well, you have to know which robot is worth which points. Because if you defeat the wrong robot, you don't get the points. And then you also have to be able to like quickly move away, like, hey, you know what, okay, you're not the real threat. I need to go here. And so it's really interesting because I feel like that's just like with life. We need to be able to gather our information accurately and judge what we need to take care of, and we need to be able to like, okay, hey, this is where I need to go, let me go there. And remain composed is probably like the hardest thing for everybody in times of stress, and definitely for heroes. I would imagine it's vital, but also very difficult. I mean, you're faced with monsters and villains. The ability to remain composed. You've heard the phrase "fake it till you make it." And it's actually something I've talked with clients about, especially when they deal with like social anxiety or like they're starting a new job. And I've dealt with this myself, every time I start a new job, and I feel like, oh no, like I'm overwhelmed. But like if you like act like you know what you're doing, then other people are going to act with you in that. And then you're going to feel more like you belong.
100%. And sometimes the things that seem like they're the most overwhelming or seem like they're the biggest that are the things that, maybe necessarily aren't. And I think that metaphor tracked pretty well in this episode when they have the 0 Point robot being the most menacing of all robots, the scariest, the biggest robot, and the students they're not worth any points, so it's like just avoid these at all costs. And I feel like that is a good metaphor, that sometimes it isn't the biggest, scariest threat that is the thing that we need to tackle. It very well may be that is the thing that we have to learn. And I'm not all for avoidance, because avoidance isn't the best coping skill, but sometimes
it's still coping, even if it's not the best coping. I remember I did a WonderCon last year or this year. I was on a panel, and one of the panelists, a friend of mine through the Geeksite community, Brittany, had met, was talking about work that she does with TAY, transitional age youth, who deal with like substance abuse and other like maladaptive coping. And for our listeners, maladaptive basically means it's not helping you in the long run. It's a bad adaptation, basically. But it's important to note that for people who are going through maladaptive coping, they're still coping. It might not be the healthiest thing in the long run, but in the short term, they are coping. And avoidance is kind of like that. It's, maybe it's not the best form of coping to do with your issues, but it is still something. And in this situation, it is the thing to do. You have a giant, crazy robot that your first instinct is, I have to deal with you because you're big and in my face. But once you realize, no, I need to avoid you so I can deal with the more important things. And so, here we see that avoidance can be helpful, but it's important for everybody, heroes and civilians alike, to know that we don't want to avoid everything that seems scary.
Again, too, like, there's a big difference between avoidance and distraction. There's a very fine line. A lot of people think that distraction is the same as avoidance, where it's not. Because sometimes when the big scary robot is looming over us, we're just not ready to tackle it. We're not there yet. So sometimes distracting ourselves with things that, can put us in a better mindset or get us in a better place to tackle the giant robot is good. It's when we binge on the distraction that it becomes avoidance, and then that giant robot, you're just never ever ready to face it. So the 1 Point robots, the 2 Point robots, the 3 Point robots, albeit still scary, but that is, we're tackling those while avoiding the big monster. We're working our way up to being able to tackle the bigger monster in the end, which I feel like the students here, like, for Deku especially, this is the first time he's even used his quirk. But a lot of these students, they've never been in a battle. They've never fought a villain or anything like that. So, of course, like, tackling the big giant robot is probably not, they're not at that stage yet.
It's to force them to figure out who they are and how they deal with stress and threats like this. When we are faced, overwhelming threat, like, that's when we start to act in a way that is more true to our natures, because we don't have the option of being someone else. When we're in that moment of, okay, I have to deal with this issue, I can't be another person. I can only be me. And we see that here with Izuku, so great. Just like in that previous episode with the sludge monster, Izuku is petrified with fear. There's this giant monster robot that is destroying buildings. All the other students are running away. Mm-hmm. Like, other students with like quirks that can do crazy things are running away, and he's like stuck. He's petrified with fear. He's berating himself. He's telling himself, "You gotta go. You gotta go. You gotta go. This is not worth anything. It's a 0 Point robot." But then he sees Ochako. Granted, we don't know that's her name. We never really were introduced to her by name, but we saw her face. We know who she is. And she's stuck under some rubble, and she's injured. And Izuku is like, I want to help, but can I? And then his true self, he he remembers that she was kind to him, and he just wants to help her so badly, and so his body moves without thinking, and he rushes in and clenches, because that's what All Might told him to do.
So clench your butt cheeks, kid.
Clench his butt
Clench
cheeks.
your butt cheeks, Deku. And he activates his power, destroying the robot, and do probably a wide range effect as well. And then also broke his legs and arm.
Pretty much every limb.
Every limb was broken except for one.
One arm.
One arm was left unbroken. But, it's here we see his true self coming out. When push comes to shove, his true hero self came out. He wasn't going to save himself. He was going to save the person who was injured.
And as All Might said in that scene, nothing is nobler than self-sacrifice.
Oh, yeah.
Which we see that. I mean, he literally put his body on the line. And I wanted to make mention, too, because we see this now, not only with Deku, but with Ochako, that there's drawbacks to these quirks.
Oh, yeah.
So, we see her using her anti-gravity quirk. She makes things float. It's really cool. But when she uses the release, if she overuses her quirk, she throws up.
Very sparkly.
In this pretty rainbow. In the very sparkly, very pretty rainbow, she vomits, and then we see the drawbacks of Deku's quirk, that he breaks pretty much every limb in his body, and so it shows that even when we're doing the things to help and to it's a good metaphor for essentially kind of going through and doing all the things, and then there's drawbacks. When we keep going, eventually we reach burnout.
And I think it's really important for people to learn soon and early on what are those drawbacks. How does your abilities affect you when you do these things, when you're interacting with this task? How does it affect you? Because that effect, that drawback is going to always be there. But if you learn how to manage it, then you can learn to work with it. And so many people, that I work with, so many clients I don't like it when I get angry because then I feel really tense and all these things. And yeah, that's part of anger. But if we understand that, then okay, well, we can't stop ourselves from feeling angry ever. That's not possible. We will feel angry at times. But if we know that we will feel angry and we know that we will have this tension in our body that we don't like, what can we do to manage that? How can we use coping skills in the moment to mitigate those drawbacks of anger? And make it easier for you to keep your cool, rational mind even though you're angry. And I think this is something that All Might is saying is yes, there are physical repercussions to using this power, but that clearly doesn't mean that that's the end of it for Deku, because All Might's got this power and he's somehow managed to find a way to work with it. Deku this is literally his first time ever using the butt clench power is what I'm going to call it. Because come on, that's a better name for a quirk than, One for All.
Yeah, 100%. Sounds so much better.
Writers of the show called me, we'll discuss new names. But, we see, though, that Deku's other drawback, not just the physical drawback, but the kind of the mental one, his self-doubt is coming in. He is beating himself up when he's realizing he's falling to the ground. He's literally falling through the air with dangling limbs like a, arm flailing inflatable tube man. And he's telling himself, I was conceited. I have only been given the right to stand at the starting line. And so he's basically thinking that he fails. He thought he failed. And he's saved by Ochako. She grabbed onto him or touched him with her zero gravity power just in time, saved him, vomited with the sparkly rainbow. So her new power is sparkly rainbow power, sparkly rainbow vomit power.
Well, yeah, sparkly rainbow vomit. Well, and it's also what's also interesting, like as he's falling to the ground, he's thinking about using his other arm, his unbroken arm, to save himself. He's thinking about breaking the other arm in order to break his fall.
And which, the force of the air pressure from the punch totally would, if it wouldn't just throw him setting back into the air again. But it's clear, that he's focused on. He doesn't think that, fine, I failed already, so it doesn't matter if I break all my arms. And this is something that, we will see him work on throughout the series. But it's really important to mention is a lot of times when people are faced with failure or perceived failure, because, again, he's perceiving himself as having failed, even though it's not true. When people are faced with perceived failure, they start to kind of justify things. They're like, well, I'm already going to fail, so fuck it, kind of thing, right? They think it doesn't matter what they do anymore, whether they're going to hurt themselves or not, because what's the point? I already lost. I already failed. And this is a very problematic and dangerous thinking error, or cognitive distortion, as we call it in the psychology world. It's basically our brain is telling us something that feels right. It feels good to just say, well, I lost, so I can do whatever I want. It basically serves as a way it gives us permission to do something that we normally would not do because we know better. But when we are so filled with that feeling of failure or frustration or upsetness and anger, it's easy to kind of justify breaking your last remaining limb. Like, he could not have known that his limbs would be healed perfectly by the nurse. So
100%.
his thought process was, well, I've already failed. I might as well just break my last arm and be done with it, and that's it. That's going to be the end of my journey. Like, that was his thinking process, the way it seemed to me. But if he would have known, oh wait, no, I can be healed properly. I can have my bones rebuilt. He probably would have made a different decision, but because he thought he was at the end, fuck it.
I wonder if he would have, because I mean, especially in that moment too, like, I feel like it's a survival instinct as well, because if he would have just smashed into the ground, chances are he probably wouldn't have survived that fall. Either. Yeah. So I do think that there was some cognitive distortion going on. The whole I already failed, so what does it matter if I break my other arm? But also that survival instinct of like, okay, well, I'm about ready to face plant from 1,000 feet in the air onto the ground, and I'm not going to survive that. So I'm going to have to break my other arm in order to survive.
And so, you know what? That's a fair point. We do oftentimes get that way. And most people will only ever face those kind of choices, hopefully never, but maybe once in their lives. Those kind of truly life-threatening moments where you have to act to save yourself. And in those kind of situations, obviously your thinking is going to be different. It's very hard to really say for sure what you're going to do. But I think it also does still reflect on Izuku's sense of self. And, he's like, you know what? I need to save myself. This is, I think, the only time he ever thinks of himself first as opposed to others. Because we've seen him walk into danger, without any regard for his safety two times before.
Twice
3 times now if you consider the robot, So he's really, not great with self-preservation, but here he's forced to. He's like, hey, I gotta save myself now. I was wanting to point out something. When Izuku did this, when he used his Blood Clench power and destroyed the robot and saved Ochako, all the other students who had looked down on him earlier, had run away from the monster robot, they're questioning his behavior in light of this power. And again, their questions are relative to the norm of the society, which is that people develop their quirks at an early age. To them, it's unheard of for someone to develop a quirk later on in life, let alone be given a quirk by someone else. So they don't know about, the butt punch power, and they can only think about it in terms of themselves. And so they're thinking, what kind of life must he have lived to be so jumpy? Because they all saw him being very jumpy and nervous at the beginning. Because they're like, he has this power. So what was going on in his life that made him this way? Mm-hmm. And, it's a really fair question that, granted, they're not looking at it the right way, but they are asking an important question is, how does one's experiences influence the way we interact with barriers and adversity? I mean, Izuku is so jumpy because he's been bullied his entire life. He's been looked down on by society, and so he always has to be very polite and nervous and everything. So, to them, it's like, but you have all this power. Okay, yeah, but let's imagine that he had this power from age 4. Can you imagine how traumatic that would be for a little kid to, destroy his house probably or something like that, not knowing how to use his power? I would be pretty jumpy, too, if I thought that every time I touched something, it would break.
And we're going to see this again, kind of foreshadowing, but later on in season 5 with another character whose quirk developed when he was younger and the drawbacks of it that he experiences. It helps explain why he is the way that he is, and it's 100%, again, having that experience of not having a quirk, being bullied for not having a quirk, and not really ever using this quirk before, it explains so much, but for these people who, that's not the norm for them, it doesn't make sense. And they're trying to make sense of it in their mind. And I believe they say, if he had all this power, well, how come he didn't get a single point?
And it's really interesting is because they didn't see him running around, not getting any points. Or at least not all of them. Only, again, we know his name, but he's never given his name. Lita is saying no one else noticed that Izuku did what he did to save Ochako despite being out of time and knowing he won't have any points.
And what I liked about it is he flat out says, everyone is missing the point.
Exactly.
Everyone is missing the point.
Yes. And it's true because that's what All Might said. The point of this test is not just, your combat abilities. It's so much more, especially the self-sacrifice. Everyone missed the point of the test. The point of the test was not just to collect, points and, destroy robots. The point was to show that you can be a hero and act in ways that aren't always self-serving, that aren't always giving you, immediate reward. That's altruism. Altruism is doing something for someone else because that's the right thing to do, not because you're going to get anything from it. You're not going to get any thanks. You're not going to get any rewards. And that's true heroism. In real life, I have a picture in my room of Stan Lee, the creator of Marvel Comics, basically saying that a true superhero is someone who does something good because that's the right thing to do, not because he's expecting a reward. And here it is. Izuku did this thing because it was the right thing to do, not because he was going to get any points or pass the test.
No, he was trying to save somebody who was in danger. And we hear Lita say that, everyone's missing the point. He didn't hesitate, despite all the concerns, despite the fact that time was running out, despite the fact that he wasn't going to get any points. He didn't even hesitate to jump into action. He just did.
What if the exam has other parameters I didn't take into account?
He's the only one that makes note of this. And we'll learn later on, more about his character and, how observant he truly is. But 100%, that is the makings of a hero. And we saw that with the sludge monster as well, where All Might says, that's a true hero, is the one that, they all say my body just moved without thinking. That's how their journey started. You didn't hesitate to jump into action when your friend was in danger despite not having a quirk. So you are worthy of my power. You're worthy of being a hero. And
that's where his worth comes from, and we saw that in the previous episode, and we're gonna keep saying it. So, in the next scene where Izuku is, as per usual, beating himself up. He's like, I know I passed the written exam, but I failed the practical exam, which nullifies any good scores. And he believes that this is the reason that All Might hasn't come to speak with him since the exam. He's kept the secret. He hasn't even told his mother that he has this power now, so his mom thought that her quirkless son went to apply for the hero school and fight robots without a power. Like, can you imagine how worried she must have been? And we see it. Like, she has we know her quirk is that she can, like, move small objects with her mind. No, she has another quirk. It's waterworks.
Yes.
She, like, that was Hydro Pump from Pokemon. No.
And super worried on top of it.
She's a water type Pokemon.
Yes.
But, it's, really interesting is that Izuku, he's protecting the secret and he knows that he's worrying his mother. But it's because it's something really meaningful to him that he had this chance to do it. And he's, even though he's beating himself up, he's still grateful. He's very mindful of his gratitude. Say, you know what, All Might, I'm sorry I didn't live up to it, but I did what I thought was right. Which, of course, was the right thing to do. And we find out from this letter with holograms and everything, they got amazing technology in this anime. Even though it's supposed to be like present day, real world. But whatever. So he gets a letter, and All Might is telling him, well, first of all, I'm teaching at UA, so that's, surprise. But also, you passed. Even though you had no points, and even though Ochako tried to negotiate on your behalf and give you her points, though that was not allowed, the points are not given just by defeating robots. Because how can a hero course reject people who save others and do the right thing? Which obviously we in the real world be like, no shit. But that is absolutely true. There's, being a hero is not just your physical strength. It's your emotional fortitude and your moral strength as well. So
yeah, and they show, again, that behind the scenes with the teachers giving points, and there was points given to Izuku for what he did by saving Ochako, and I think he got top marks, like, for that action. And also, like, we don't know much about Ochako at this point, other than she's very kind to Izuku. She keeps him from falling the first time they meet. But you see, this boy that she doesn't know saved her life, and she's going up to the faculty and saying, like, hey, he can have some of my points. Please give him some of my points. I mean, the selflessness that we see from Ochako even kind of rivals Izuku a little bit. Not to the same extent of,
physical,
lack of self-preservation.
But it is, in a matter of speaking, because she's saying, hey, I'm going to sacrifice my opportunity to get into this school. Because all these people really wanted to go to school to achieve their dreams of being a hero. She's willing to sacrifice her dreams for this kid she does not know who saved her life. And, obviously we know that they were like, yeah, no, you keep your points because you earned them. But, he's going to be fine. Because All Might says, I'm going to try to do the voice. Okay, hold on. Come, young Midoriya. This is your Hero Academia. Academy. Fuck. I can't even say the word. Because I was looking at the subtitles. So, Academia. So this is your Hero Academia. It's the name of the show.
Yes.
I love it when they use the name of the show in the show.
And he...
he said the thing.
He said it. And he even says it's your actions that inspire others. And that's where we see, like, his actions, what he did for Ochako inspired her to go and say, hey, like, give this kid some of my points because he deserves them.
I mean, that's the beginning of the academy. This is the beginning of your learning journey of what it means to be a hero, is that your actions can inspire other people to greatness. Even when you don't succeed, you are helping others. This is the lesson that I think is most, that I want to bring out is, if you act in line with your values, with your core values, with the thing that you know is right, then you are being a hero. Because other people will see that. And we don't know the impact that we have on other people around us. Sometimes, we are just doing our thing and we're doing the thing that's important to us, and other people see that. And it inspires them to do what's important for them and what's valuable to them. And then so on and so forth. This is a story that basically says, when you think that you are all alone is when you're least alone. Izuku thought he was alone. He thought he failed. But look, he had all these people that were like, hey, no, wow, you did amazing stuff. They're recognizing him. He's being validated for the first time in 16 years.
Mm-hmm. My God, how good that must feel.
He developed his water powers also.
He did. He developed his water powers. And, not only is he achieving, his dream of attending the most prestigious school for hero training, but he, the kid who had to just believe in himself because nobody else believed in him, gets to see his dream come to fruition, that he is going to be a hero.
And I just, that ending, it made you want to cry too. Your waterworks are coming out. Mine were. I was just like, oh my God. So I was so happy for him.
You.
And this is a really great way to start his hero journey, as his narration says. Like, this is the beginning of how I became the greatest hero. The adversity and being bullied his whole life, all these things that society was doing to him and pushing on him never stopped him. He always kept moving forward in spite of or because of his fear. And this is what matters to me, so I'm going to do it. That is, I think, his, we've said it before and we're going to keep saying it. That's his true power.
100%. Because that's hard, facing that type of adversity, again, constantly being bullied, all that type of stuff. When we see this, for me watching it, it would be so easy for him to have given up and just said, this is not going to happen for me. I don't have a quirk. There's no way. And just, choosing a different path, and, we talk about this with origin stories all the time. Whether it's our own origin story or our favorite characters, is that there's so many different paths that you can go down, that somebody who is facing the same obstacles could very well go down a very different path. It really depends on other traits, and we see that resilience that he has, which that is a superpower in and of itself, because, like I said, there's not many people, and I understand this is a fictional world, but that when faced with those types of obstacles would have continued carrying on. He very well, again, could have become a villain, even without a quirk. He could have gone down the villainous route.
Yeah, considering how intelligent he is and how observant he is, where he can recognize the ways other people's quirks work and the mechanics of a quirks and everything. If he was a villain, he'd be like Lex Luthor level, which really says how strong his values of heroism are. And we're going to get back to this topic of, what turns people into the villains versus heroes later on with our miscast heroes, which I still love that phrase. And, but, I want our listeners to think about the times in which they have felt overwhelmed and the times in which they felt they couldn't move forward. There's nothing wrong, first of all, with not moving forward if you are facing those obstacles. If it is not safe for you to move forward in any mental, physical, emotional, spiritual way, don't. But that's not what makes but the fact that you kept trying later on, like, okay, fine, I couldn't do it now, but then later on I got help and I moved forward. I mean, I think every therapist that I've ever spoken to, and I'd like to believe that every therapist has seen this at least once, that they had a client that had just the most traumatic experiences, things that would turn anyone into a villain. And, they find that resiliency and they are, actively trying to learn the skills to rebuild their lives and to be the hero version of themselves. I know I've had clients like that, and those are the moments that really make me yeah, this is why I do this. Is to see someone who is I recognize that I did bad things, or bad things happened to me, or I made bad choices, but I really want to make this change in my life. I mean, there's that joke, how many psychologists does it take to change a light bulb? Just one.
The light bulb has to want to change.
Really want to change. And when you have a client like Deku who really wants to change, who really wants to grow, then there's no stopping you.
And it's so funny when we talk about this, because I myself have had clients like this as well. Those that sometimes when they have bad things that have happened to them and have been done to them by other people, how quickly it becomes, that they want revenge or they want justice. And again, it's that old trope of recognizing that revenge or that justice, it doesn't take any of that away. It doesn't make you feel better. It changes nothing, because ultimately it's being able to accept what happened and being able to move forward from that. And I've had that with clients where they've had that realization, where they're okay, I might wish bad things to happen to these people, but ultimately, the best revenge that I could get is being okay and going forward.
Success
with my life
is the best revenge.
Yes, 100%. And I feel that for Deku, look at me now.
And we're going to see that in later episodes, especially in the next episode with his relationship with Bakugo. But can you imagine for someone like Deku, who's been beaten down his whole life, here he is at the Hero Academy, the #1 Hero Academy in Japan. He made it. This was his dream. And honestly, I don't think he's actually ever really thought beyond this. But that's really makes it all that more powerful. He never thought he would get here. And here he is. So it leads us really well into our next episode, episode 5, which is titled What I Can Do For Now. Which I love that title also, because it's just so much to say there about mental health and resiliency and growth, but we'll get to that next episode. But I want to thank our dear listeners, as always, for joining us, for coming with us on this journey. By the time this episode airs, Los Angeles Comic-Con will have already happened. I'm going to just speak from future tense now. I had a great time. I'm sure I did. We're recording this before Comic-Con, but, future me is telling me that I had a great time. I will have been that future past tense. I'm getting confused. You know what? I Pre-Comic-Con Ben is going to be on 6 panels at LA Comic-Con. Post-Comic-Con Ben will tell you about it later. But you know what? This is, something for all heroes. Find a thing that works for you. Find a thing that is your passion and keep moving forward. So thank you to our audio editor, Kyle Rebar, or as we know him, Muscles, the Swole Hero. And thank you to our graphic designer, Ali Ford. On Instagram, she has...
Wicked Encounters. Wicked Encounter.
My brain is just not working today. It's not even Monday. It's not even Monday, guys. But, it happens. So Wicked Encounters on Instagram for our graphic designer, Ali Ford. On Instagram, you can find our audio editor at Kyle Rebarf. And also thank you to our sponsor, All Mind Health, which is a professional psychological corporation in Southern California, treating people throughout the state via telehealth and in person in Orange County by Dr. Isaac Tights, the real all might of the mental health world. At least to me, he is, because he's my brother. So he's my hero. So thank you all, and remember to go beyond plus ultra.